Hey NEBOSH students, sometimes NEBOSH ask a question which doesn't focus on one topic. Sometimes it focuses on a broad range of things across a whole series of topics. Let's take a look at a very broad question right now, which is all about risk assessment. So here's the question. It says, based on the scenario only, comment on whether the risk assessment for the future algae removal work is suitable and sufficient. 12 marks. Then it has a stem. And it says the HSE document, Managing for Health and Safety, HSG 65, states that a risk assessment must be suitable and sufficient. Now, the first thing we have to do is read the question really carefully, make sure we understand, because most people are going to be blagged, absolutely confused by that question, even though it is written in perfectly understandable, plain English. And just because you're confused doesn't mean that the question's unclear, it just means that you haven't read it slowly and carefully. So let's read it again. Based on the scenario only, comment. What does comment mean? It means give your opinion. Give your opinion on whether means is it this or is it that? Is it one or the other? It's not asking for positives. It's not asking for negatives. It's just give your opinion on whether the risk assessment for this job, this future algae work, is suitable and sufficient. And for you to understand what suitable and sufficient means, NEBOSH are actually helping you here, because then in the stem, they're pointing you towards a guidance document. They're saying, HSG 65 says a risk assessment should be suitable and sufficient. Now you might be there thinking, what on earth does suitable and sufficient even mean? In which case I would say, what course did you study? This is discussed on the course. You should know this, or at least you should know roughly what it's talking about. So we can take a look at the course materials, of course, and I've got plenty of course materials on this. I mean, here are this is our study book. If I just type in suitable and sufficient, and there you go. It's like bang, oh, there we are. This is what suitable and sufficient means. That's what it means. If you want more information, we've got loads of free information on our YouTube channel. If you go into our channel playlists, you'll find a whole playlist called the 12 Steps to Smashing Your NG1, IG1 NEBOSH Exam. And it'll go through the 12-step process that our students follow to get some of the highest pass rates in the NEBOSH e-learning industry. If you would like even more help, then you can head over to our website, compassa.co.uk, click on NEBOSH Exam Help, and you'll also find study books that you can download for both the national and international general certificates. And without further ado, let's get back into it. So the question is, give your opinion on whether the risk assessment for this algae removal work meets that criteria. This criteria here. Look, was a proper check made? Did we ask, did we consider who's affected? Did we end up with all the reasonable precautions implemented? Is the risk now low, and did we involve workers or their representatives in the process? Did we do those things or not? And some of those things maybe we did, some of those things maybe we didn't. You have to give your opinion on whether it is, in the end, suitable and sufficient. Now, if your course materials are not very good, I don't know who you've studied with, maybe you've got something that's fairly basic, PowerPoint, I don't know, then just go to the document that NEBOSH have pointed out. So if you go to this, I mean, all you have to do is just Google HSG 65. Just Google HSG, HSG 65, boom, it's there. Literally, it's there. Put it in, free copy, you're done. And then what we would do is just do a search for suitable and sufficient. There are only 3 hits, so it's not going to take long for you to find it. Bang, there you go. The law states it should show that. And can you see how our course materials basically say exactly the same thing? And there's a little bit of extra information here about proportionality and so on. So we have to read the scenario and ask ourselves, was a proper check made? Did it ask who else is affected? Did it deal with all the significant risks? Did it have all the reasonable precautions in place? Did it reduce the risk to a low level? Did it involve people? Let's take a look at the scenario and see whether or not it did those things. Now, to be clear, this is not a real NEBOSH scenario. This is a scenario that I have written, so it may not be perfect, but I must ensure that I don't use confidential NEBOSH scenarios and put them on YouTube. Anyway, let's just scroll down to the interesting bit, just in the interests of time. We're going to scroll down here. One morning, a small group of maintenance workers are instructed to remove the algae and rainwater from the stone paths due to rainwater following heavy rain. A lot of rain in there. Due to regular rain, more rain. The paths have become very slippery because of the algae, and this is posing a risk to customers and visitors. The maintenance supervisor, who has been at Oakley Gardens since it opened, provides a general outline of the tasks, but does not conduct a formal risk assessment for the repair work, assuming that the workers already know the area and tasks well. The task involves removing algae from the stone pathways using a combination of pressure washing and chemical algae remover. The workers are given basic PPE such as gloves and boots, but they're not provided with any specific equipment for working on slippery surfaces or any instruction on the safe use of the pressure washer or the chemicals used. There is also no formal emergency plan in place in case a worker slips or is injured while cleaning. The incident. One of the maintenance workers is treating a section of the pathway with, hang on a bit. So the question's asking about the future algae work. Right, okay, but here we've got like current algae work. So, right, okay, so we've got an incident. They're then going to risk assess it, and they're risk assessing future algae work. Okay, right, so we're not even looking at whether this risk assessment is suitable and sufficient. We're looking at the next risk assessment. Okay, right, so we have an incident, someone slips and falls. Following the incident, the general manager decides to review the health and safety provisions with you. They mention that Oakley Gardens has experienced a few minor slips and falls in the past, but has never required a formal review of health and safety practices. During the meeting, the GM suggests bringing in an external contractor to conduct the pathway cleaning going forward. Right, and that's what we're risk assessing, due to the specialised nature of the work and the increased risk of slips and falls. You arrange a meeting with the GM, the maintenance supervisor, and a few workers to discuss how to manage the risks associated with the maintenance tasks and to conduct a thorough risk assessment, and it's this risk assessment that we're asking about, thorough risk assessment of the algae removal work. You explain that the purpose of this meeting is to create a comprehensive risk assessment that addresses hazards, precautions, and emergency measures. You decide to follow a general 5 steps to risk assessment approach. During the meeting, wow, okay, so it's pretty much this bit here which the questions is focused on. During the meeting, the maintenance supervisor mentions that while they've supervised this type of work many times, they would benefit from specific training on managing risks related to wet and slippery outdoor areas. A maintenance worker mentions that his existing work boots are quite slippery despite being new, and shows these to the people in the meeting. He then suggests including additional PPE such as non-slip boots for work on wet stone surfaces, as well as a communication device for lone working situations. After the discussion, you draft a risk assessment that includes these additional controls and updates the PPE requirements for similar future tasks. The team agrees that the additional measures will help prevent future accidents and improve the safety of all workers involved in outdoor maintenance. Based on scenario only, comment on whether the risk assessment for the future algae work is suitable and sufficient. So the first thing we do with all of that is we go back to our definition of what suitable and sufficient is, and we ask ourselves, did they do a proper check? Because if we go to our course materials, it says things like this: a proper check, this means you did a thorough job. It wasn't just a paperwork or desktop exercise. You visited the location, you looked, you made inquiries, and you put some effort in. Now, reading the scenario, does it sound like they did a proper check? Well, to some extent yes, to some extent no. What's the one thing they failed to do? They failed to visit the area. They failed to go check the paths. They failed to go see how slippery it is. They failed to do any kind of testing on the slipperiness of the algae. They've failed to look at all kinds of information, like maybe previous accident reports, previous accident trends, and so on. But they have also done some good things, like they're talking to the supervisor, who's got quite a bit of experience in this type of work. They're talking to the workers. They're actually examining the workers' boots, although it was the worker who raised the issue of slipperiness. They didn't ask to see his boots. He volunteered his boots. Hey, sorry to interrupt. If you're regretting your choice of course provider and you'd wish you studied with me instead, there's no problem. You can. Why don't you head over to Google right now and Google Compassa Rescue. Search for that and go to our rescue package. This is available for both international and national General Certificate students. Perhaps your course is expired. Perhaps you've failed one of the assessments and you don't know what to do next. Perhaps you're just not happy with the level of teaching or support you're getting from your course provider. In that case, come check out the rescue package and click on Apply Now. We will offer you a very, very special discount so that you can get access to our full General Certificate course with all of my tutor support, all of our mock exam support, NG2, IG2 project support, all of our video tutorials, study books, PDF guides. You will get everything that we offer to our own students. And then you will have a chance of joining us with some of the highest pass rates in the NEBOSH e-learning industry. Let's get back to the advice. And so here's what I've written down as part of my answer. I've said, According to HSG 65, the risk assessment process has to carry out a proper check, a thorough process. This is partially done. I'm saying it's partially done because that's my opinion. Why am I giving my opinion? Because it's asking me for my opinion. It says comment on whether it is suitable and sufficient. So I'm giving my opinion on whether they've done a proper check. I said, well, partially. They've done the risk assessment with the GM, the supervisor and the workers, and they've asked for their opinions, and that is part of the thorough check. But there's no mention of a visit to the pathways. That's not good. A proper check would include visiting the site and examining the area and the equipment. A positive was that they examined the existing boots to see how slippery they are, and that's good, but they didn't do that themselves. They relied on a maintenance worker who raised the issue, and that's not good. They also failed to check other sources of information, like accident records, safety data sheets, slip resistance data from the boot supplier. Like, they should have asked for that. Okay, well, where did you buy these boots? What's the slip resistance score of these boots? Can we check the chemicals? Because are the chemicals that we're using to remove the algae, do they make the paths more slippery or less slippery? Like, they're not checking these things, and they really should. One of the next criteria is you asked who might be affected. That means you considered all of the possible groups who could be affected by the risk. The employees, the contractors, the visitors, the trespassers, the young people, the old people, the vulnerable people, the pregnant women. You've considered all of those people. And here we have a public building. If we go right to the very beginning, Oakley Gardens, it's a conference centre, event space. You have visitors there, delegates at conferences. You've got weddings and so on. So we have to consider the impact on those people who may be nearby, they may be present while the algae removal work is going forward. And so here I've made a point that they've considered only the most relevant people, which are the maintenance workers. They haven't considered other staff or others like visitors who are clearly at risk from pressure washing, flying debris, slips on water. And the potential contractor isn't considered either. The next thing is you have to deal with all of the obvious significant risks, take into account the number of people who could be involved. And they have considered the slips quite a bit. They have. So if we look at the scenario in this discussion here, they're talking about training and how to manage slip hazards basically. They're talking about the slippery boots, and they want a communication device for lone working. Right. But if we read the full scenario, and I appreciate, in the interest of time, I skipped over a bit of it. But if we read this, we've got issues with chemicals. Yeah, we've got issues with the pressure washer. I mean, pressure washer can be quite hazardous in itself. Chemicals used, and you even end up with the worker having a rash on his back due to lying in the water and being exposed to the chemicals. So we could talk about how it did partially deal with some of the obvious significant risks, like the lone working and the slip hazards, but it didn't deal with electricity, the pressure washing, and the chemical risk, or things like that. And so we make a note of that here. It considered slips and lone working, but it ignored other risks. Now, just to be clear, I haven't really written that bit out there in full. I should write a bit more than that. That's not a full answer. So I'm going to say it considers slips and lone working, which are significant risks, but there are more risks than that. It ignored other risks such as the risk of slips, trips, and chemicals. Brilliant. Anyway, I'm going to pause there. Hopefully you've got the gist, the idea of how you approach that type of question. You look at the definition of what suitable and sufficient is, and then you look at what the scenario does, or what the scenario says, and you're just asking, did it fulfill the criteria of suitable and sufficient or not? And why? And if it's a bit mixed, that's okay. You can say, well, this is good, that's bad, this is good, that's bad, and here's why, and explain yourself. And just to show you kind of what else I did, I mean, these are just basic notes that I drew up myself, real basic. I need to write these out in full. But I got like 22 points there that I'm going to make out for what was basically a 12-mark question. Whew. Anyway, I hope you found that useful. Suitable and sufficient, not my favorite question. But if you get it, you have to know how to handle it. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments below.